And so I want to take a moment just to share a little bit about 2015 and what happened to me, because that really sets the tone for um, the journey that I've been on, the reasons why I pull from all the different bodies of wisdom that I do, and the unique perspective that I take in terms of this really powerful paradigm shift. And so, as I was saying, I did that model of this really, really well. I had a really successful tech career. I did a lot of that in the startup world where it's a lot of stress, a lot of challenges, but was very, very successful. And so I quickly rose up the ranks and things were great. And then in 2015, that all came to a screeching halt. It was, let's see, a couple years after my wife and I went through things I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy as far as trying to start a family. The emotional trauma of that finally caught up to me. We were also at a point where my physical health was starting to really suffer. I had ongoing back pain. I always struggled as a kid with OCD, so mental health challenges, and I spent years in therapy and thought I really had nipped that one in the bud, but it came roaring back in 2015. And I also struggled with weight. So physically, I just felt, and when I looked in the mirror at myself, I just felt like I don't know who I am and what I am, but this is not it. After all the stuff that my wife and I went through, our relationship honestly was in a real rough spot. Um, and I think we both were dealing with grief and the process of grief in a way that was really, really challenging. And the thing is that, I love my wife, love my daughter dearly, but you start to feel like each day is, no matter your best intentions, you wake up in the morning, at some point there's some unexpected argument that just kind of knocks the wind out of you. And that's what it felt like. And it was like, despite trying my absolute best for the people I care about most, it was like I couldn't right this ship. And it was really, really scary for me. I had spent 3 years by that point working nights and weekends in addition to my day job as a tech leader. I spent nights and weekends working on an entrepreneurial web venture, a side hustle that was about to fail. And I knew it was going to fail. And I had already gotten that feeling about 6 months ago. And I felt all this guilt, all this shame about all this stuff I asked my family to sacrifice, all I had sacrificed, and what was I going to have to show for it? What felt like absolute nothing or absolutely nothing. And then to top it all off, um, my daughter, who was um, about 1.5 at the time, I remember looking at her and feeling like, what happened? I absolutely adore my daughter. I love nothing more than being a father and worked really hard to become one. But I got to a point where I was like, ever since my daughter showed up, it was like nothing ever fully added up. There was always something that was not enough, that was lacking, that I just couldn't get to. There was a part of my life that needed more energy and time that I had that I didn't have. And so in some ways, I started to actually develop this sense of resentment that took me a while to actually face head on and embrace as just a reality. Because there's all this guilt that immediately follows that feeling. The moment you look at your child and you're just like, life was better off before. And even now, I've done a lot of work around this, but it's tough to be able to admit that and say that. And yet that was the truth. And so all this was swirling around. All of this was swirling around. And I'm the type of person that it's like when there's a problem, call a spade a spade. Let's not sugarcoat things. Let's deal with it. Let's move forward because it doesn't serve anybody to pretend otherwise. And yet I had tried all these different things for each part of my life, in terms of my physical health and well-being, in terms of my relationships, in terms of work and so forth. And every time I tried something, maybe I could move the needle just a tiny bit, but it wouldn't last. And it seemed like every bit of advice out there was asking me to use time I didn't have with energy that didn't seem to exist to try to create some new habit really that was going to take time to actually implement and yield results when I needed them right now, today, in that moment. And so I got to a point where I was like, there's no way out. There's literally no way out. And I remember walking down from a shower And it was the middle of the night, and I was in a bad place internally. There was like a storm of just fear, anxiety, shame. Like, all of it was just swirling inside me. And I'll never forget, I walked downstairs. My daughter was in bed, sleeping with my wife, and they just looked so peaceful. And I remember walking up to the foot of the bed, and I'm just looking at them, and tears start to come out of my eyes because in that moment I knew I was going to fail them. All I wanted to do was to be able to provide and protect for them. And yet here I was struggling so much and I couldn't see a way out that wasn't more of the same thing that I had been doing, which was this and this and this and this and this, which is what got me into that mess. And so in a really humbling moment, I just whispered to them, I said, I'm sorry, because I knew that that was it. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I knew I wasn't going to be able to deliver in all the ways that I was taught and knew how to deliver. And then what happened was that my heart got really, really, really loud. Not like adrenalized, an adrenaline kind of state, but it was just, I was like, bam, it was pumping really hard. And it was this magical moment where it was like really loud despite the silence of that, of, being, after midnight and it being dark in the room and all that. And I just sat there and I had this inspiration that forever changed my life. And that inspiration was in that moment, I was like, man, my body, this thing that I had grown to hate so much because of all the problems I was having, especially physically, it was as if my heart was saying, like, okay, we're with you. We've always been here. Now you're finally ready to listen. And I remember going, like, this is the moment if my body truly is immediate gratification obsessed and really out to get me and something I have to be on guard for, then that's the moment. That's the moment where it could have taken total advantage of me, and yet it didn't. And so that in that moment, I realized, wait a second, there's this wisdom that's out there that's telling me I got to be on guard with my body. I've got to, be strong, dig deep, and so forth. And yet, in this moment of what you might call involuntary surrender, the exact opposite was happening. And suddenly I was like, wait a second, my body, when it heals, it doesn't do this. When I break, let's say, when I was younger, I broke my arm in two spots here at the same time, and it hurt really bad. And it took a long time to heal. But my body didn't say to my leg or the rest of my body, hey, you're on your own because we've got to tend to the arm now. And so I remember going like, wait a second, I never even considered a possibility where there wasn't this. And so that led me to start interviewing people, taking my expertise in user experience and design and usability testing. And I started to ask people questions about the day-to-day realities of their life, the day-to-day patterns of their life. I didn't ask people, what do you believe in terms of work-life balance and fulfillment and all? I asked people questions like, there's advice out there that says, stay the course to grow stronger. Just keep pushing ahead. And there's advice out there that says, don't ignore when life is nudging you to change, giving you this opportunity. And I would ask people, they're both true. But where do you decide, or how do you decide to point the needle in one direction or the other? And so what I started to realize was, wait a second, this advice that's out there is full of contradictions. All these self-help books and these personal growth and development workshops and stuff, they're all talking about one side or another of these contradictions that I was getting stuck in. And that I'm pretty sure if you're watching this, you've experienced. But the thing that I began to realize more than anything else was that everybody was doing this. Everybody was straining in some way, like a tight fist. Just clench your fist right now and feel that, trying to get to some point up ahead, get through some project, get to some point on the calendar, get to some point in terms of financial, like having a certain amount of money in your bank account. And everybody was thinking, if I just do that and I just continue to squeeze, I'll get to a point where finally this will open up. And it got me to realize that when I was interviewing people in their 20s, they were doing it trying to get to the place that people are at in their 30s. And the 30s were trying to do it for the people in their 40s and 50s and so forth, all the way up to the oldest person I interviewed was in their mid 80s who was near death. And everybody, whether they were trying to strain to get to a point where they could pay off school debt, or, be in a safe position in their career, or start to build a legacy, or save for their family, for their children's college, or have a good, a nice nest egg, or squeeze in whatever life they can before they die. Everybody was doing this. And this to me is the grind, the day-to-day inner world that most of us are trying to deal with by trying to make this rest of the world ease up, thinking if that happens, suddenly this will go away. But it doesn't.